Little black girl told the judge, "I'm my dad's lawyer." Then something unbelievable happened. When 7-year-old Zara Johnson announced to a packed courtroom that she was representing her father in an eviction case, everyone assumed they were witnessing a child's innocent misunderstanding of how the legal system works. But this wasn't a little girl playing dress-up with her late mother's law books. This was a brilliant young mind who had absorbed years of legal training and was about to expose a billionaire corporation's systematic violations of housing and civil rights law. Armed with an oversized briefcase and an extraordinary understanding of tenant protection statutes, Zara transformed what should have been a routine eviction into a landmark civil rights case that would change housing law forever. Her mother, a public defender who died when Zara was 4, had left behind more than law books. She had instilled in her daughter an unshakable belief that justice belongs to everyone, especially those who can't afford expensive attorneys. As corporate lawyers in $1,000 suits prepared to steamroll another poor family out of their home, they had no idea they were about to face the most formidable legal opponent of their careers. 7-year-old Zara Johnson clutches a worn briefcase that's almost as big as she is, her small fingers wrapped tightly around the handle as she climbs the imposing courthouse steps beside her father. Marcus Johnson, a single parent and community activist, faces eviction proceedings that could destroy everything he's built for his daughter and their neighborhood. The briefcase belonged to Zara's late mother, a public defender who died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving behind law books and a legacy of fighting for the underserved. Zara has spent countless hours reading those books, absorbing legal terminology and courtroom procedures with the intense focus only children possess when trying to understand their world. Her father can't afford a real lawyer. The community legal aid office is overwhelmed, and private attorneys charge fees that exceed his monthly income from 2 part-time jobs. The eviction threatens not just their small apartment above the community center Marcus runs, but the entire neighborhood program that provides after-school care for dozens of local children. Zara's Sunday dress is carefully pressed, her hair braided with ribbons that match her serious expression as she prepares to do something unprecedented. She's memorized every detail of their case, every legal precedent she could find in her mother's books, every argument that might save their home. The morning sun casts long shadows across the courthouse plaza, where other families wait with resignation for proceedings that will likely end in displacement. Today, this little girl will attempt something that defies every rule about legal representation and childhood innocence. Her determination carries the weight of her mother's unfulfilled dreams and her father's desperate hope. The briefcase contains more than legal documents. It holds a family's entire future. Inside the courthouse, Zara observes everything with the keen attention of someone who understands that details matter in places of power. The marble floors echo with footsteps of lawyers in expensive suits, their confidence born from years of education and privileged access to justice. Bailiffs eye her curiously, and used to seeing children in formal courtrooms outside of custody hearings or family disputes. Marcus holds his daughter's free hand, drawing strength from her unwavering composure even as his own anxiety threatens to overwhelm him. The waiting area fills with other defendants facing similar eviction proceedings, mostly Black and Latino families whose gentrifying neighborhood has become too expensive for longtime residents to afford. Zara studies their faces, recognizing the same worried expressions her father wears late at night when he thinks she's sleeping. She's overheard his phone calls with social services, his conversations with other parents about finding new housing, his quiet tears when rejection letters arrive from legal aid organizations. The community center they call home serves 43 children whose parents work multiple jobs to survive in an economy that seems designed to push them out of their own neighborhoods. When their case number is called, Zara straightens her shoulders and follows her father toward the courtroom doors. Her small size makes the briefcase appear comically oversized, but her expression shows nothing amusing about their situation. The other waiting families watch them pass, perhaps recognizing something familiar in their struggle, perhaps hoping for a miracle they've all stopped believing in. Judge Patricia Morrison has presided over housing court for 15 years, processing hundreds of eviction cases with the efficient detachment necessary to manage an overcrowded docket. She's seen every possible defense, every desperate attempt to delay the inevitable displacement of families who can no longer afford rising rents in their changing neighborhoods. The plaintiff's attorney, representing a billionaire development corporation, arrives with a team of associates and boxes of documentation proving the defendant's inability to pay increased rent. Marcus Johnson's case appears straightforward, a single father behind on payments, facing eviction from property slated for luxury redevelopment. Judge Morrison expects the proceeding to last no more than 15 minutes, long enough to review the facts and issue the standard judgment. When Marcus and Zara enter the courtroom, the judge notices the child immediately but assumes she's simply accompanying her father for moral support. The plaintiff's legal team spreads their materials across the table with practiced efficiency, their expensive suits and confident demeanor sending a clear message about the case's likely outcome. Marcus takes his seat at the defendant's table, looking overwhelmed by the legal machinery arrayed against him. Zara carefully places her briefcase on the table and begins removing documents with methodical precision. Judge Morrison watches with growing curiosity as the little girl organizes papers like someone who understands their significance. The courtroom fills with the typical tension of housing proceedings, where human stories collide with property law and economic reality. Something about this case feels different, though Judge Morrison can't yet identify what makes it stand out from hundreds of similar evictions she's overseen. When Judge Morrison calls the case to order, Marcus Johnson stands to represent himself, his voice shaking slightly as he begins to explain their circumstances. But before he can complete his first sentence, Zara rises from her chair and speaks with startling clarity. "Your Honor, I'm Zara Johnson, and I'm here as my father's legal representative." The courtroom falls completely silent. Lawyers, court staff, and observers all staring at the 7-year-old girl who just claimed to be practicing law. Judge Morrison removes her reading glasses, certain she's misheard the child's statement. "I'm sorry, young lady, but you can't represent your father in court. That's not really how the legal system works." Zara opens her briefcase and pulls out a thick folder of documents, her movements deliberate and confident. "Your Honor, I understand your concern, but I've researched the relevant statutes, and while children cannot be licensed attorneys, there's no explicit prohibition against family members providing legal assistance in housing court proceedings." The statement demonstrates knowledge that should be impossible for someone her age, yet her delivery suggests complete understanding of every word she's speaking. Judge Morrison exchanges glances with the court clerk, both women recognizing they're witnessing something unprecedented in their combined decades of courtroom experience. The plaintiff's attorneys whisper among themselves, unsure how to respond to this unexpected development. Marcus looks at his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror, realizing she's about to attempt something that could either save them or make their situation infinitely worse. Zara continues speaking with the poise of someone far beyond her years, her small voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom. "Your Honor, I've been studying my mother's law book since I was 5 years old. Sarah Johnson was a public defender who graduated from Howard University Law School and practiced housing law for 8 years before her death." She pulls out a framed photograph of her mother in graduation robes, followed by bar certification documents and case files. "She taught me that the law belongs to everyone, especially those who can't afford to hire attorneys." Judge Morrison leans forward, intrigued despite her initial skepticism about this highly irregular situation. The photograph shows a young black woman holding a baby, clearly Zara, on law school graduation day, suggesting the child has indeed grown up immersed in legal concepts and courtroom culture. "While I cannot practice law as a licensed attorney," Zara continues, "I can assist my father in presenting his case, and I believe the evidence will show that our eviction violates several tenant protection statutes." The 7-year-old's vocabulary and legal reasoning astound everyone present, but Judge Morrison remains bound by procedural rules that govern courtroom proceedings. "This is highly unusual, Miss Johnson. Your knowledge is impressive, but court rules require proper legal representation or self-representation by the actual defendant. Zara nods respectfully, clearly having anticipated this objection. Your Honor, my father will represent himself, but I request permission to assist him as a family member, which is allowed under Section 47B of the Housing Court Procedures Manual. The plaintiff's lead attorney, James Richardson, stands to object, his expensive suit and Harvard Law ring glinting under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. Your Honor, this is clearly a publicity stunt designed to generate sympathy for defendants who simply haven't paid their rent. Children cannot provide legal counsel, regardless of their claimed knowledge or tragic family circumstances. His dismissive tone reveals the arrogance of someone accustomed to winning cases through superior resources rather than superior arguments. Zara turns to face him directly, her young face serious but unintimidated by his condescending attitude. Mr. Richardson, I understand your position, but you're incorrectly characterizing both our situation and my role here. We're not seeking sympathy. We're seeking justice based on legal facts that your client has apparently chosen to ignore. The 7-year-old's direct challenge to a senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms sends murmurs through the courtroom gallery. Richardson looks genuinely shocked that a child has not only addressed him directly, but used proper legal terminology while doing so. Judge Morrison realizes she's witnessing something unprecedented. A 7-year-old engaging in legal discourse with confidence that would be remarkable in a law school graduate. Mr. Richardson, I'll hear the child's assistance to her father, but within appropriate bounds, the judge rules, her curiosity now fully engaged. Zara bows slightly toward the bench, demonstrating courtroom etiquette that most adult defendants never master. Judge Morrison decides to test the child's claimed legal knowledge before allowing the case to proceed. Miss Johnson, if you're going to assist your father, you need to understand the seriousness of these proceedings. Can you explain what grounds you believe exist for contesting this eviction? Zara opens her briefcase again, retrieving a folder marked with colored tabs and handwritten notes that suggest months of careful preparation. Your Honor, our research indicates 3 primary legal defenses against this eviction action. She speaks with the methodical precision of someone who has rehearsed this moment countless times. First, the landlord failed to provide proper notice of rent increases as required by Municipal Code Section 12A, which mandates 60 days written notice for increases exceeding 15%. Second, the property contains multiple housing code violations that create uninhabitable conditions, giving tenants the right to withhold rent under the warranty of habitability doctrine established in Matthews v. City Housing Authority. Third, the eviction appears to be retaliatory action against my father's community organizing activities, which violates tenant protection laws designed to prevent landlord harassment of activist tenants. Each point demonstrates sophisticated understanding of housing law that would challenge even experienced attorneys. Judge Morrison takes notes as Zara speaks, recognizing that regardless of the speaker's age, the legal arguments have substantial merit and deserve serious consideration. The courtroom atmosphere shifts dramatically as observers realize they're witnessing something historic, a 7-year-old mounting a competent legal defense in housing court. Richardson's team exchanges worried glances, clearly unprepared for substantive legal challenges from defendants they expected to dismiss quickly. Marcus watches his daughter with amazement, understanding for the first time the depth of knowledge she's absorbed from her mother's books and his own community organizing work. Zara continues presenting their case with remarkable composure, citing specific statutes, referencing relevant case law, and demonstrating mastery of legal concepts that typically require years of formal education to understand. Your Honor, I've prepared a detailed brief outlining each of these defenses, with supporting documentation and legal precedents. She hands a thick document to the court clerk, its professional formatting and comprehensive research revealing months of dedicated preparation. Judge Morrison accepts the brief, scanning its contents with growing astonishment at the thoroughness and sophistication of the legal analysis. The document reveals not just memorized information, but genuine understanding of how different laws interact to protect tenants' rights. Richardson realizes his assumption about an easy victory may have been premature. Regardless of who prepared this defense, it presents serious legal challenges that demand substantive response. The 7-year-old has transformed what should have been a routine eviction into a complex legal proceeding that will require his full attention and expertise. As Judge Morrison reviews Zara's legal brief, a stunning revelation emerges that changes the entire nature of the case. The housing code violations Zara cited aren't just theoretical legal arguments. They document serious health and safety hazards that the development corporation has deliberately concealed from housing authorities. Zara presents photographs of water damage, exposed electrical wiring, and structural problems that create dangerous living conditions for all building residents. Your Honor, these violations aren't recent developments, she explains, her young voice steady despite the weight of her accusations. Our investigation shows the landlord has known about these problems for over 18 months, but chose to pursue evictions rather than make necessary repairs. The photographs reveal conditions that would shock even experienced housing court judges. Children's bedrooms with black mold covering entire walls, kitchen ceilings collapsed from water damage, heating systems that haven't functioned for 2 winters. Marcus had complained repeatedly about these conditions, but his requests for repairs were ignored while rent increase notices continued arriving monthly. The development corporation's strategy becomes clear: deliberately allow buildings to deteriorate while raising rents, forcing out long-time residents so properties can be demolished for luxury redevelopment. Zara's legal brief documents this pattern across multiple properties owned by the same billionaire corporation, revealing systematic displacement of low-income families throughout the neighborhood. The most shocking evidence emerges when Zara presents internal corporate communications she obtained through a children's advocacy organization her mother once worked with. The documents reveal explicit strategies for removing existing tenants through rent increases and strategic neglect of property maintenance. Your Honor, these emails show that our eviction isn't about unpaid rent. It's part of a coordinated plan to empty the building for demolition. One email, dated 6 months earlier, instructs property managers to accelerate tenant turnover through aggressive rent increases and minimal maintenance spending. Another discusses the demographic transformation needed to make the neighborhood attractive to higher-value residents. The communications reveal breathtaking callousness toward families who have lived in the community for generations, treating human displacement as merely a business strategy for maximizing property values. Richardson's team looks genuinely shocked. These internal documents weren't supposed to be accessible to tenants, and their contents could expose the corporation to significant legal liability beyond the current eviction case. Judge Morrison studies the communications with growing anger, recognizing deliberate violations of tenant protection laws designed to prevent exactly this kind of predatory behavior. The 7-year-old has uncovered evidence of corporate misconduct that could result in criminal charges, not just civil housing violations. Zara's presentation reveals the interconnected nature of housing inequality, community displacement, and corporate power in ways that illuminate systemic injustice rather than individual hardship. The community center Marcus operates serves families throughout the neighborhood, providing after-school programs, job training, and social services that corporate developers view as obstacles to gentrification. Your Honor, closing our community center doesn't just affect our family. It eliminates support services for over 200 neighborhood residents. She presents documentation showing how similar evictions have destroyed community institutions throughout the city, leaving vulnerable populations without resources they depend on for survival. The pattern reveals strategic targeting of community leaders and social service providers, effectively dismantling neighborhood support networks that help low-income families remain stable in their communities. Marcus realizes his daughter has understood something he missed. Their eviction isn't random economic hardship, but deliberate political action designed to reshape the neighborhood's demographic composition. The Development Corporation views his community organizing as a threat to their redevelopment plans, making his family's displacement a strategic priority rather than simply a financial transaction. Judge Morrison begins to see the broader implications of the case she initially expected to be routine housing court business. The courtroom atmosphere becomes increasingly tense as Richardson's team realizes they're facing not just a housing eviction case, but potential exposure of systematic civil rights violations. Zara presents evidence that the Development Corporation has specifically targeted Black and Latino families for eviction while offering lease renewals to white tenants at current rent levels. Your Honor, this pattern suggests discriminatory enforcement that violates federal fair housing laws. The statistical analysis she provides, clearly prepared with adult assistance, but presented with remarkable understanding, shows eviction rates by demographic group that reveal unmistakable racial bias in the corporation's tenant removal strategies. Richardson objects strenuously to the introduction of discrimination claims in what he insists should be a simple non-payment case, but Judge Morrison overrules him, recognizing that the evidence suggests violations of federal civil rights law that fall within the court's jurisdiction. The 7-year-old has transformed a routine eviction proceeding into a complex civil rights case that could attract national attention and set important legal precedents. Marcus watches his daughter present evidence of systemic racism with the calm professionalism of an experienced civil rights attorney, understanding that her mother's legacy lives on through her extraordinary daughter's pursuit of justice. The case has become much larger than one family's housing crisis. It's now about challenging the corporate strategies that destroy entire communities in the name of urban development. Word spreads quickly through the neighborhood about the 7-year-old girl challenging a billionaire corporation and housing court. And by the afternoon session, the courthouse gallery fills with community members who rarely have reason to enter such imposing government buildings. Elderly residents who remember when the neighborhood was predominantly working-class families sit beside young parents who fear their own eviction notices will arrive soon. Local news crews set up cameras outside the courthouse, drawn by the human interest angle of a child practicing law, but staying to document the broader story of community displacement and corporate power. Zara's case has become a symbol of resistance against forces that seem too powerful for ordinary families to challenge, proving that justice sometimes comes from the most unexpected sources. The media attention makes Richardson visibly uncomfortable. His corporate clients prefer to conduct their business away from public scrutiny, especially when that business involves displacing families and destroying communities. Judge Morrison calls for order as the gallery continues filling with supporters, recognizing that this case has evolved beyond typical housing court proceedings into something with broader social significance. Marcus feels overwhelmed by the attention, but draws strength from seeing neighbors he's served through the community center coming to support his family's fight for survival. During the lunch recess, community organizers and tenant rights advocates approach Marcus and Zara with offers of additional legal support and resources for their case. Local law students volunteer to help with research, experienced attorneys offer pro bono assistance, and community groups pledge to mobilize public pressure against the Development Corporation's displacement tactics. Zara speaks with visiting lawyers with remarkable poise, discussing legal strategies and case precedents with vocabulary that continues to astound everyone who hears her. The important thing isn't just winning our case, she tells a reporter, but making sure other families don't have to go through what we're going through. Her mature perspective on the broader implications of their legal fight impresses even cynical journalists who arrived expecting to cover a novelty story about a precocious child. The 7-year-old understands something many adults miss. Individual cases matter, but systemic change requires challenging the underlying structures that create injustice in the first place. Social media posts about the little girl lawyer go viral, with thousands of shares and comments from people who see their own struggles reflected in Zara's fight against corporate power. The attention brings both support and scrutiny, as legal experts debate whether children should be allowed to participate in formal court proceedings even as they acknowledge the sophistication of her legal arguments. The afternoon session begins with Richardson requesting a continuance, claiming his team needs time to respond to the unexpected complexity of the case. Judge Morrison denies the request, noting that the corporation has had months to address the housing violations Zara documented and years to comply with fair housing laws they appear to have systematically violated. The decision sends a clear message that the court takes the presented evidence seriously, regardless of who gathered and presented it. Zara continues her methodical presentation of evidence, now with the confidence that comes from seeing her legal arguments taken seriously by judicial authority. She presents testimony from other tenants about similar experiences with rent increases, maintenance requests ignored, and discriminatory treatment based on race and immigration status. Each testimony reinforces the pattern of systematic displacement that goes far beyond individual landlord-tenant disputes. The cumulative effect transforms the courtroom into a forum for documenting community-wide injustice rather than resolving a single family's housing crisis. Richardson's objections become increasingly desperate as the evidence mounts, clearly demonstrating violations of multiple housing and civil rights laws that could expose his client to significant financial penalties and criminal liability. As the day progresses, Judge Morrison realizes she's presiding over a case that will likely be studied in law schools and cited in future civil rights litigation. The 7-year-old's presentation has not only saved her family from eviction, but exposed systematic violations of federal housing law that demand immediate remedy and long-term oversight. Miss Johnson, the judge addresses Zara directly. Your presentation today has been remarkable. Regardless of your age, you've demonstrated understanding of legal principles that would challenge experienced attorneys. The acknowledgement from the bench validates everything Zara has worked toward, proving that truth and justice can prevail even when they come from the most unlikely sources. Marcus realizes his daughter has not only saved their home, but potentially changed housing law in their city, establishing precedents that will protect other families facing similar displacement. The corporate attorneys pack their briefcases with obvious frustration, understanding that what should have been a routine eviction has become a legal disaster that will require extensive damage control and possible settlement negotiations. The community members in the gallery begin to believe that fighting back against powerful corporations isn't hopeless, that organized resistance and legal knowledge can level playing fields that seem impossibly tilted against ordinary families. Zara has proven that age doesn't determine wisdom, that justice belongs to everyone willing to study the law and speak truth to power. Judge Morrison delivers her ruling with unusual formality, recognizing the historic nature of the case and its potential impact on housing law throughout the jurisdiction. After reviewing the evidence presented, this court finds that the plaintiff has failed to follow proper legal procedures for rent increases and has violated multiple housing code requirements that render the eviction action invalid. The packed gallery erupts in cheers, but Zara maintains her professional composure, understanding that legal victories require careful attention to detail even in moments of celebration. Judge Morrison continues, "Furthermore, the evidence suggests systematic violations of fair housing laws that warrant investigation by federal authorities and immediate remedial action to protect all tenants and properties owned by this corporation." The ruling goes beyond simply stopping the Johnson family's eviction to ordering comprehensive inspections of all corporate-owned properties and establishment of a tenant protection fund to compensate families who were illegally displaced. Richardson's team requests permission to appeal, but Judge Morrison notes that the evidence of housing code violations creates immediate safety concerns that cannot wait for appellate review. The decision establishes important precedents about tenant rights, corporate accountability, and the responsibility of property owners to maintain habitable conditions regardless of their development plans. The media coverage of Zara's courtroom victory spreads nationally, with major news networks picking up the story of the 7-year-old who challenged a billionaire corporation and won. Legal experts debate the implications of allowing children to assist in court proceedings, but most acknowledge that Zara's presentation was more competent than many adult attorneys manage in similar cases. Her story becomes a symbol of hope for communities facing displacement, proving that knowledge and determination can overcome seemingly insurmountable advantages in wealth and institutional power. Marcus grants interviews reluctantly, preferring to let his daughter speak for their family since she understands the legal issues better than anyone else involved in the case. "My mama always said the law belongs to everyone," Zara tells reporters. "And sometimes it takes a kid to remind grown-ups that the rules are supposed to protect people, not hurt them." The quote becomes widely shared on social media, inspiring other communities to research tenant rights and challenge questionable eviction actions. Law schools begin incorporating Zara's case into their curriculum as an example of effective legal advocacy and the importance of understanding community context in housing law. The Development Corporation faces investigations in multiple jurisdictions where they own properties, with other families coming forward to report similar discriminatory practices. 6 months later, the Johnson family still lives above the community center, which now serves even more neighborhood children thanks to increased funding from foundations inspired by Zara's story. The 7-year-old continues studying her mother's law books, but now she also receives tutoring from volunteer attorneys who recognize her exceptional legal aptitude. Marcus has been invited to speak at community organizing conferences about the importance of combining legal knowledge with grassroots activism, always crediting his daughter for teaching him that age doesn't determine wisdom or capability. The community center's walls display newspaper clippings about their court victory alongside children's artwork and neighborhood achievement certificates, reminding everyone that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they understand their rights and refuse to accept injustice. Zara has been accepted into a gifted program that will allow her to accelerate her education while maintaining connections to the community that shaped her understanding of law as a tool for social change. The Development Corporation settled related lawsuits for millions of dollars, establishing a fund to help displaced families return to their neighborhoods and requiring company-wide training on fair housing compliance. Their story proved that sometimes the most powerful legal arguments come from those with the most at stake in the outcome. The broader impact of Zara's case continues rippling through housing courts nationwide, with judges and attorneys reporting increased attention to procedural violations and discriminatory patterns they might previously have overlooked. Tenant advocacy organizations use her case as a model for challenging systematic displacement, showing that thorough legal research and community organizing can overcome even well-funded corporate legal teams. Law schools have established scholarships in Sarah Johnson's name, recognizing the importance of making legal education accessible to students from communities most affected by housing inequality. Zara speaks at the scholarship ceremony each year, encouraging young people to see law school as a pathway to community service rather than just personal advancement. "My mama wanted to help people who couldn't help themselves," she tells scholarship recipients. "And that's what lawyers are supposed to do. Make sure everyone gets treated fair under the law." The 7-year-old who walked into housing court with an oversized briefcase has become a symbol of how legal knowledge, community support, and moral courage can challenge systems that seem designed to favor wealth over justice. Her victory reminds everyone that in America's legal system, truth and preparation matter more than expensive suits and corporate power, but only when someone is brave enough to stand up and demand that the law fulfill its promise of equal justice for all.